The dinner shift at the Gilded Room had ended. Ryan Hayes, a single father working as a waiter, leaned over the empty VIP table that the millionaire Clara Whitmore had just left behind. The whole restaurant believed she had handed him a humiliation written in numbers $0 in tip. His co-workers were already laughing. But beneath the edge of the receipt, Ryan found a black card, smooth and heavy. On the back, a single line in handwritten ink. You don't need a tip, you need a chance. 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, Whitmore Global. The evening had not begun with mystery. It began the way every shift did at the Gilded Room, with white linen pulled tight across the tables, candles trimmed to the same height, and the low hum of money speaking in low voices. Ryan Hayes moved through it the way he had for the past 4 years, head down, hands steady, learning which tables wanted to be seen and which ones wanted to disappear into their wine. He was 34, lean from skipped meals and double shifts, with the kind of quiet face people forgot the moment he walked away. The other servers on the floor knew him as the one who never complained. He took the late tables. He took the difficult ones. He took the cancellations no one else wanted. What they did not know was that he kept a folded list of bills in his back pocket, that the rent on the small apartment he came home to each night was already 2 weeks behind, and that the list grew faster than the tips he brought home each week. Clara Whitmore arrived at 7:45 alone in a black coat she did not bother to hand to the host. She sat at table 9 without looking at the menu. The manager flinched when he recognized her, since she had appeared on the cover of Forbes twice that year, and tried to assign her to Marcus, the floor's most decorated server. But she lifted one finger toward Ryan as he passed and said, "Him. I want him." Ryan did not flinch. He had served senators' athletes and one actor who had refused to be photographed with his wife. He brought her water without ice, set it down, and waited. Clara did not open the menu. She watched him instead, the way a person watches a door they have not decided whether to open. "Recommend something," she said at last. "Anything. I want to see what you choose for a stranger." He told her about the duck breast, then changed his mind and offered the lamb because she looked tired and the duck was too rich for someone who had not slept in a while. She did not ask how he knew. She only said, "The lamb," and a bottle of the Margot, decanted on the table, not in the back. The kitchen sent the lamb wrong twice, once underdone, once dry. Each time Ryan returned with a different plate, no apology rehearsed, no excuse offered. When Clara asked him to explain what had gone wrong, he told her exactly without protecting the chef. The other servers exchanged glances near the pass. Marcus muttered that Ryan had drawn the worst seat of the entire night. Clara kept asking for things. The wine poured at a different angle. The bread replaced halfway through. The candle moved twice, then a third time. Ryan did each one without comment. Halfway through the second course, he noticed she reached for her glass with her left hand slightly behind her plate, and that her small leather notepad sat on the right side of the table, where it would not fall naturally under her writing hand. He moved the glass, the bread plate, and the leather folder, all of them quietly to her left side. He did not announce the change. She did not thank him. She watched him for the rest of the meal, the way an auditor watches a ledger that does not balance. Near the end of the second course, she set down her fork. "Do you have anyone at home?" Ryan gave the answer he always gave. He said yes. He said there were responsibilities he could not walk away from, and he left it there. He did not lower his voice for sympathy. He did not let the answer hang in the air to coax a larger tip. He poured her coffee and stepped back. "Why do you stay in this job?" she asked. "Because it pays the rent," he said. "And because I learned a long time ago that being seen is more dangerous than being useful." She wrote something on the corner of her napkin and folded it under her saucer. She did not look at him again for the rest of the meal. When she stood to leave, she dropped 2 black leather bill folders on the table, the receipt and the card holder, and walked out through the front entrance where no one waited to drive her home. Marcus came over the moment the door swung shut, grinning before he even saw the slip. "Let's see what the Queen left you," he said. Ryan opened the holder. The tip line was empty. A long, deliberate zero drawn in the same handwriting he had seen earlier on the napkin. The other servers gathered close enough to laugh and far enough away to pretend they were not laughing. One of them clapped him on the shoulder and said something he did not bother to hear. He cleared the table himself, stacked the plates, folded the linen, and lifted the saucer to wipe under it. That was when he saw the card. Black matte, heavy in the way only expensive things were heavy. He turned it over. The writing was small, square, and certain. He read it twice before he believed it. Then he slid it into the inside pocket of his vest, finished closing his station, and walked out the back door of the gilded room into a wind sharp enough to clear his head. He did not sleep that night. He sat at the small kitchen table in a rented one-bedroom on the south side and turned the card over and over between his fingers until the edges warmed. He had spent enough years listening to wealthy people to know that most of what they said was performance. He could have thrown the card into the drawer with the unpaid notices and gone back to his shift the next afternoon. The gilded room would still be there. The bills in his pocket would still be there. Nothing would change, which was he had learned its own kind of safety. But there was a difference between safety and surrender, and he had been losing track of which one he was choosing. He thought about the way Clara had looked at him after he had moved the glass. Not impressed. Not grateful. Watching. He thought about how easily she had walked out without a tip, as if a number on a slip of paper meant nothing to her, because she had already left him something heavier in its place. He thought about the word she had used. Chance. Not job, not interview, not opportunity. Chance like a door that closes after one knock. By 4 a.m, he had pressed the only shirt he owned without a coffee stain. By 5:30, he was on the train heading north, the card in his coat pocket, the address memorized. By 6:45, he was standing on the corner of Wacker and Clark, looking up at a glass tower with the word Whitmore etched in steel above the entrance. The lobby was colder than the street outside. Marble floors swept toward a security desk, shaped like a half moon, and 3 men in dark suits stood near the elevators, in the kind of stillness that meant they were paid to notice everything. A woman behind the desk lifted her chin as Ryan approached, ready to ask him to leave before he finished his first sentence. He did not give her the chance. He laid the black card flat on the marble in front of her without speaking. She looked at the card. She looked at him. She looked at the card again. Then she picked up a phone, said 2 words, and listened. The line on her face shifted in a way she could not quite hide. She handed Ryan a temporary badge, clipped to a black lanyard pointed toward the elevators, and said, 47th floor. She's been waiting since 6. Ryan stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on his reflection, a tired man in a pressed shirt holding a piece of paper he did not yet understand. He did not know whether he had been given a chance or set up for a humiliation more elegant than the one Marcus had laughed at the night before. He only knew 2 things. The first was that the floor numbers were rising. The second was that he was no longer the same kind of invisible he had been 12 hours earlier in the dining room of the gilded room. When the elevator opened on the 47th floor, the air felt different. Quieter. Cleaner. The hallway stretched in a single straight line toward a frosted glass door at the far end, and behind that glass, he could see the silhouette of a woman standing alone, her back to the entrance, her right hand resting flat against the surface of a long table. Clara Whitmore did not turn when the door slid open. She spoke as if she had been continuing a sentence already begun. "Close the door behind you, Mr. Hayes," she said. "We have very little time, and I have a problem that none of the people who work for me have been able to see." The frosted door slid shut behind him. The room was long, narrow, lined on one side with glass, and on the other with framed contracts no one was meant to read. Clara turned only halfway enough for him to see her profile and the file already open on the table. "You moved my glass last night," she said. "You did not ask why. You did not look at me afterward to see if I noticed. You only fixed what was wrong and stepped away. That is the rarest skill I have seen in 11 years of running this company." Ryan stayed near the door. He had not yet been invited to sit. "You did not bring me here for a compliment." "No," Clara said. "I brought you here because my company is bleeding money, and the 7 people I pay to find the leak cannot find it. Some of them, I suspect, are the ones holding the knife." She gestured to the chair across from her. He sat. She slid 3 folders toward him, each one thicker than the last. Operations, logistics, vendor contracts. The numbers meant little to him. He had never read a balance sheet in his life. He told her so without softening the admission. "Good," she said. "I don't need another accountant. I have 11 of those. I need someone who can look at a room without already deciding what they are looking for." For the next hour, she did not explain the business. She explained the people. Who reported to whom? Who took lunches with whom? Whose office light stayed on after 8? Ryan listened the way he listened to a dining room on a Friday night, sorting the rhythms, feeling for the wrong note. He did not take notes. He did not interrupt. When she finished, she left him alone in the room with the files. Outside the glass, the floor was filling. Men in suits walked past without slowing, some of them glancing in, some of them not bothering. He could feel their assessment land and dismiss him in the same second. He did not look up. He opened the first folder and began. He worked the way he worked a section. Slowly, then faster, watching for repetition. The numbers did not catch him at first. The signatures did. The same 3 initials appeared on every shipping authorization that had been flagged as a loss, but the slant of the pen leaned different ways on different days, as though the same name had been written by more than one hand. He moved to the delivery logs. The trucks left the warehouse at 4 in the afternoon on most days, except for the contracts that had been disputed. Those left at 6:15 every time, regardless of weather, regardless of driver, regardless of route. 6:15 was after the second shift logistics manager went home. 6:15 was when the cameras at the loading dock had been logged for scheduled maintenance 11 times in 8 months. It was not the size of the theft that betrayed it. It was the discipline of it. Whoever had done this had done it the way a waiter learns to clear a table without the guests noticing the plate is gone. Clara returned at 11. He told her what he had seen. He told her without performance, in the same tone he used when he told the kitchen the lamb had come back wrong. She listened without writing anything down, which he had already understood was her way of remembering. "Whose name keeps appearing?" she asked. 3 sets of initials, Ryan said, all routed through the same office of approval, all under the operations chain that reports to a man named Grant Caldwell. The expression on her face did not change, but something in the room changed. She walked to the window and stood with her hand flat against the glass. "Grant is the man the board wants in this chair, if I lose the vote next month," she said. "He is also the man who has been telling me for 6 weeks that the leak is on the technology side." She turned back. "I want you to keep coming, not as a temporary consultant, as mine. You will sit in the meetings I sit in. You will attend the dinners I attend. You will not speak unless I ask you to. You will only watch." He did not answer right away. He was thinking about the rent and the bills and the shifts at the Gilded Room he would have to give up. He was thinking about how a man with no degree and no references walks into a 47th floor office and pretends he belongs there. He was also thinking that he had spent 4 years being looked through, and that being looked at, even with hostility, was a different kind of life. "On one condition," he said. "If I see something you do not want to hear, I still tell you. You do not pay me to flatter you. You pay me to look." Clara almost smiled. That is the only condition I would have accepted. By the end of that first day, Ryan had a contractor agreement, a payroll number, and a permanent badge issued under his own name that swiped him through the lower garage gate, the lobby turnstile, and the 47th floor elevator. Clara had also signed off on a personal parking spot on level 3, the kind reserved for senior staff. He never used it. He took the train. The first meeting he attended was on a Thursday. There were 9 men around the table and 1 woman who was not Clara. Grant Caldwell sat at the far end in a charcoal suit that fit him the way money fits people who were born inside it. He had silver at his temples, a voice trained low for boardrooms, and the easy confidence of a man who had already counted the votes. When Clara introduced Ryan as her new strategic observer, Grant smiled the way a wolf smiles at a closed gate. "Strategic observer," he repeated. "I am sure Mr. Hayes brings a very particular perspective. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, what is your read on the latest EBITDA contraction in the Midwest distribution arm?" The room went still, in the way rooms go still, when everyone is waiting for a man to drown. Ryan did not flinch. He did not pretend to know the term. He looked at Grant across the table and said, "I do not know what those letters mean, but I know that 3 of the men in this room looked at you before they looked at her when she introduced me. That is the part I am here to read." 2 of those 3 men looked down at their notepads. The third, a logistics director named Ellis Granger, looked at Grant and held the look for half a second too long. Clara did not glance at Ryan. She moved on to the next agenda item as though nothing had happened. But after the meeting, she walked past him in the hallway and brushed her hand once against the back of his sleeve, the smallest signal a person could give, and kept walking. The mockery began that afternoon. He heard it in the elevators when he was not supposed to. The waiter. The pity hire. Clara's emotional support project. In the executive cafeteria, 3 men stopped speaking when he sat down with his coffee, then started again, louder on a topic he was meant to fail to follow. He drank his coffee. He left. Grant tried twice more in the following 2 weeks. Once with a question about hedge ratios, once with a question about international transfer pricing. Both times Ryan answered the only way he could, with what he had seen rather than what he had learned. Both times he gave Clara a name. The first name was a vice president who never made eye contact when he disagreed. The second was a corporate attorney named Margaret Lowell, who carried 2 phones into every meeting and only ever set one of them on the table. Clara had Margaret followed for a week. The second phone, it turned out, was registered to a holding company that shared an address with one of Grant's college friends. Clara filed the information quietly and did nothing public with it. She wanted the whole web, not one strand. There was a night late when Clara stayed in the office past everyone else. Ryan was still there, finishing a stack of vendor records he had asked to see again. She brought 2 glasses of water from the small kitchen on the floor and set one in front of him without speaking. She sat across from him, in the same chair Grant always took. "My father started this company with $26,000, she said. "He died before he saw it become anything. I have spent 15 years protecting what he built, and I have learned that the people closest to me are the ones who watch the most carefully for the moment I tire. I forget sometimes that there are other ways for a person to watch." She did not say anything else. He did not fill the silence with reassurance. He only nodded once and finished his glass of water and went back to the records. When he left at midnight, the light in her office was still on. The next week, the trap closed. It came on a Tuesday morning in an emergency censure session of the board that Clara had not been told about until she was already in the elevator on the way up. Grant had called it under a clause that allowed any director to demand an immediate review of a senior personnel matter. He stood at the head of the long table when Clara walked in, and he did not sit down. "There is a leak in this company," he said. "Ms. Whitmore, you brought a man into our operations 3 weeks ago without disclosing his lack of credentials, his lack of background check, and his lack of any contractual confidentiality clause that would survive litigation. That man has now been linked to 17 documents, transferred to an outside competitor." He turned a laptop toward the table. The screen showed an email header, Ryan's name in the sender field, a date stamp from 2 Saturdays earlier. an attachment list of internal pricing sheets. Then a video grainy but clear enough of a man in a dark coat handing a manila envelope to a stranger in a parking garage. The man was the right height. The man was the right build. The man had Ryan's slight forward lean. "I have additional records," Grant said. "Bank deposits, phone metadata, card swipes at the building after hours. It is all here. I am formally moving that the board accelerate the scheduled vote on Ms. Whitmore's stewardship. I am asking for a final session this Friday. We have no choice but to question whether the chief executive of this company is still in a position to make sound personnel decisions." Clara did not look at Ryan. She looked at the laptop. Then she looked at the long line of board members around the table, and Ryan watched her see in real time what he had already seen. That she was alone in this room. That if she defended him now on instinct, the Friday vote would erase her before she could fight for either of them. When she spoke, her voice was the same one she had used on the night she ordered the lamb at the Gilded Room. Flat, controlled, built for survival. "Effective immediately, Mr. Hayes is dismissed from any role with Whitmore Global," she said. "Security will escort him from the building. All access credentials are revoked. The legal team will determine the appropriate next steps." Two men in dark blazers were already standing behind Ryan's chair. He had not heard them enter. He stood up without being told. He did not look at Grant. He did not look at the board. He looked only once at Clara and saw that she would not meet his eyes. They walked him out through the main floor, past the glass offices, past the cafeteria, past the elevator bank, where 3 weeks earlier he had stepped out for the first time in a pressed shirt that had cost him nothing because he already owned it. The men did not touch him. They did not need to. The walk itself was the punishment. In the lobby, the woman at the half-moon desk did not lift her chin this time. She kept her eyes on her screen as he passed. The black card was no longer in his pocket. He had left it on the table in the boardroom beside the laptop, where Clara would see it the next time she sat down. He walked out onto Wacker Drive. The cold off the river hit him hard enough to remind him he still had a body. He stood on the corner for a long time before he understood that he had nowhere to be and that the train he needed to take home would not run for another 40 minutes. The Friday vote was 3 days away. He did not go home right away. He walked 4 blocks east and sat on a bench across from the river and let the city continue without him for an hour. He could go back to the Gilded Room. The manager would take him on the late shift again, no questions asked. Marcus would smirk, the kitchen would forget him within a week, and the black card would become a story he never told. That was the easier door. It was already open. But the longer he sat on the bench, the clearer the second thing became. He had not stolen anything. He knew the exact dates he had been inside the Whitmore building. He knew the exact dates he had not. And the video Grant had shown the board, however convincing, had been built on a timeline that did not include him in it during the moment that mattered. He thought about the line on the card. You need a chance. He had taken the chance. The chance had cost him whatever fragment of pride he had walked in with. But it had also given him 3 weeks of watching the inside of a company from a chair he should never have been allowed to sit in, and he could still remember what he had seen. He had 72 hours before the Friday vote. That was enough, or it was nothing. He went home. He laid the few documents he had carried out in his coat pocket flat on the kitchen table, and he began. He did not have system access. His badge had been deactivated within the hour. He did not have the legal right to ask anyone at Whitmore Global a single question. So he worked the way he had worked the dining room. He worked with what could not be deleted. The first thing he remembered was the loading dock, the trucks that left at 6:15, the cameras that had been logged for maintenance. Cameras could be erased, but maintenance work orders were filed with the building management company, not with Whitmore Global. The building was leased. The orders were physical. He had seen the binder on the desk of the security supervisor in the lobby on his very first morning. The second thing he remembered was the parcel courier. Whitmore used a small private courier for interoffice documents because Clara did not trust the national carriers. Every envelope that left the building carried a 4-digit suffix on its tracking label printed not by computer, but by an old impact printer in the mailroom. The suffix changed daily. The third thing he remembered was the parking garage. Every car that entered after 8 in the evening had to swipe a personal badge at the lower gate, and the gate's log was printed nightly to a paper roll. Under city ordinance, garage access logs from any commercial tower had to be archived for 90 days in case of a property crime claim. The rolls were boxed at the end of each week and stored in a locked file room behind the attendant's office. They could not be edited because they were not on a server. They were paper. He spent the next 2 days finding the right people without going near the 47th floor. The building manager turned out to be a man named Howard Bennett, who remembered Ryan as the quiet one who had said good morning every time he walked through the lobby. Howard did not owe Ryan anything, but he also did not like Grant Caldwell, who had once humiliated his daughter at a charity dinner. Howard let Ryan see the maintenance logs in a back office on a Wednesday afternoon with the door closed. The cameras at the loading dock had been logged for service 11 times in 8 months. 2 of those work orders carried Grant Caldwell's signature on the authorization line signed at 11 at night and at 3 in the morning on dates that did not appear on any operations calendar. The scheduled maintenance had no corresponding invoice from any vendor on the building's approved list. They were ghost orders, signed in real ink, pulled out of sequence. The courier's records were harder. Ryan walked into the small storefront on Lower Wacker that the courier used as a dispatch office and asked for the manager, a woman named Helen Carter. He told her the truth. He told her he had been accused of leaking documents on a date he had not been near the building, and he was not asking her to break any rule, only to confirm whether or not a sealed envelope with a particular 4-digit suffix had been logged out of Whitmore Global on a particular morning. Helen did not answer him that day. She told him to come back the next afternoon. When he did, she handed him a single printed sheet across the counter without a word. The sheet showed the suffix from the morning Grant had claimed Ryan handed an envelope to a stranger in a parking garage. The envelope with that suffix had been logged out of Whitmore Global at 9:12 in the morning. Ryan had been at the Gilded Room from 8 until 2 on that day on a brunch shift, and there were 3 co-workers, a manager, and a closed credit card transaction in his name on file at the restaurant to prove it. The third piece was the one that mattered. On Thursday evening, less than 15 hours before the Friday vote, Ryan went down to the lower gate and waited for the attendant's shift to change. The new attendant was a young man named Eric Donovan, who had let Ryan through the gate twice during his 3 weeks at the company, because Ryan had once helped him carry a heavy box from the elevator. Eric did not have authority over the locked file room, but the building manager did. Howard Bennett was the one who unlocked the door. The boxed paper rolls sat on metal shelves in a small windowless room. Ryan found the right week, the right night, the right hour. He pulled the roll. The badge swipes recorded on it covered the 43 minutes during which a man in a dark coat had supposedly handed an envelope to a stranger inside the garage. There was no swipe on Ryan's badge in those minutes. Ryan's badge had not been swiped at the building at all that night. There was, however, a swipe on Grant Caldwell's badge in at 7:52 and out at 8:35. He brought the roll home, flattened it under glass. The maintenance log, the courier sheet, the paper roll. He sat in front of all 3 for a long time, and then he made one phone call. Not to Clara, but to a man named James Whitford, whose name he had memorized from the first board meeting he had ever attended. The board of Whitmore Global was scheduled to vote on Clara's removal on Friday morning at 10. Ryan arrived at 9:40 in the same shirt he had worn the first time he walked into the building. He did not have a badge anymore. He did not have an appointment. He carried a brown accordion folder under his arm, the kind sold at any drugstore for $2, and inside it he carried the only weapon he had. Howard Bennett met him in the lobby and walked him to the elevator without speaking. Howard pressed 47 and stepped back. The doors closed. When they opened again, the long hallway looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks earlier, except that the frosted glass door at the end of it was already open, held that way by James Whitford, who had taken Ryan's call the night before and read enough to know the room needed to hear the rest. The boardroom was full. 12 members around the long table. Grant Caldwell stood at the head mid-sentence, the same laptop open in front of him, presiding over a session he had called himself. Clara sat to his right in the chair the company had taken from her 3 days earlier. The moment Ryan walked through the door, her face did something he had not seen before. It moved. Grant turned. "This is a closed session," he said. "Mr. Hayes has no business in this room." Ryan did not answer him. He walked the length of the table and laid the brown accordion folder down in front of Clara. On top of the folder, he placed the black card she had once left under his saucer at the Gilded Room, the same card he had set down on the boardroom table 3 days earlier when they had walked him out. He spoke to the room, not to Grant. "On the morning Mr. Caldwell claims I delivered 17 documents to an outside competitor, I was working a brunch shift at the Gilded Room. There are 3 co-workers, a manager, and a closed credit card transaction in my name to prove it. The receipts are in this folder. The envelope Mr. Caldwell entered into evidence carries a tracking suffix from the Whitmore Courier. That suffix was logged out of this building at 9:12 that morning. I could not have logged it out, because I was holding a coffee pot on Erie Street at the time." He opened the folder. He did not raise his voice. "The cameras at the loading dock have been logged for maintenance 11 times in the last 8 months. 2 of those work orders were signed by Mr. Caldwell at 11 at night and 3 in the morning on dates that do not appear on any operations calendar, with no matching invoice from any approved vendor. The orders are filed with building management, not with this floor. They cannot be retroactively edited from this building. The parking garage on the lower level archives its access logs on paper rolls by city ordinance for 90 days. The roll for the night of the alleged handoff has been recovered intact. It does not contain my badge. It does contain Mr. Caldwell swiped in at 7:52 and out at 8:35. He laid each piece down as he named it. The maintenance log, the courier sheet, the paper roll under its protective sleeve. He did not look at Grant. "I have no degree," he said. "I have no training. I do not know what hedge ratios are. But I spent 4 years watching strangers eat dinner, and I learned that the things people forget to hide are usually the things they did not think anyone like me would ever look at." The room did not move. James Whitford reached across the table and picked up the courier sheet. He read it twice. He set it down. He looked at Grant Caldwell, then at Clara, then at the chairman to his left, and gave a single short nod. Grant began to speak. His voice was no longer the voice trained low for boardrooms. It was higher, faster. He talked about chain of custody. He talked about evidentiary standards. He talked about a former waiter walking into a board meeting with documents he could not legally have obtained. The chairman cut him off mid-sentence. The vote on Clara's removal was suspended. The vote that happened instead 20 minutes later was on whether to refer the matter to outside counsel and to local law enforcement, with the scope expanded to include Ellis Granger and Margaret Lowell. That vote was not close. 2 security men walked Grant Caldwell out of the building through the same lobby Ryan had been walked out of 3 days earlier. The woman at the half-moon desk did not lift her chin for him either. Clara found Ryan in the hallway outside the boardroom after the others had left. She did not begin with an apology. She knew him well enough by now to understand that an apology offered too quickly was its own kind of insult. "I let fear decide for me," she said. "I have spent 15 years deciding for myself, and the one time I let fear take the chair, I almost lost the only person in that room who was telling me the truth. I am not asking you to forgive that today. I am asking you to let me earn the right to ask." Ryan looked at her. He looked at the black card still resting on the table inside the boardroom, visible through the open door. "I will come back," he said. "Not as a project, not as a story you tell at dinners. as a consultant on operations with a contract with a salary that does not depend on your mood, and with one condition. Name it, she said. Open a hiring program, he said. For people without degrees, people who have spent 10 years carrying plates, driving trucks, stocking shelves, watching rooms. The kind of people who learn to see because no one ever bothered to look at them. Bring them inside. Pay them properly. Listen to them when they tell you what they see. Done, Clara said. She offered her hand. He took it. The handshake was brief, professional, the kind of handshake that begins a working relationship rather than ends an emotional one. Behind them, through the open door of the boardroom, the black card lay on the table where he had placed it no longer. A humiliation? No longer a summons, only a small rectangle of paper that had once said in a single line of handwritten ink that a man at the end of a long shift was worth more than the zero on his receipt. The value of a person is not held in their title, their bank account, or the uniform they wear to work. There are skills no business school teaches: patience, observation, honesty under contempt, dignity when no one is watching. Be slow to measure anyone by the place they currently stand, because sometimes the person quietly serving beside you is the one who sees the truth that an entire room of power has missed.